These players are some of the most contentious in all of Dynasty fantasy football. We are going to break down some bull cases, some bear cases, and go back and forth a little bit. You guys like when we debate players, and we thought that these 8 players or so are guys that we probably need to get on record, kind of going through the pros and cons, the ranges of outcomes. So, Danny, let's not waste any time. A guy that we have debated ad nauseum in one of our live streams before was Kenneth Walker, running back of the Seattle Seahawks. I think I'll, give the bull case here if you want to give the bear case and kind of why we're a little bit split on him and also kind of what we expect of him. Kenneth Walker has been like a, mid-range RB2, at times RB1 level production. The problem with Kenneth Walker really has been like down-to-down consistency and, maybe staying on the field and whatnot. But when healthy, when he's operating and firing at full cylinders, he's a great running back. And the coaching staff always buys into him. Every single offseason, we get a lot of training camp reports about how great Kenneth Walker looks, whether it was the Pete Carroll coaching staff or the most recent coaching staff that took over. So with Kenneth Walker and the Seattle Seahawks running game, we feel excited about the player we get, usually about weeks 1 to 7 of any given fantasy football season. But then the wheels start to fall off. So he's just so difficult to rank from that perspective.
Yeah, I think he's difficult to rank from that perspective. Again, I'm a little bit more bearish on him because, like you said, although he's had flashes of him being, is he the RB5 rest of the season? Is he the RB3 rest of the season? Were questions that people had at certain points in the last couple of years. Well, when you actually take the totality of his years, he hasn't really had a year of consequential production, of top 15 point per game production. And we're going into year 4 at this point. Charbonnet did more with his workload when Kenneth Walker was out of the lineup than Kenneth Walker has ever done in the lineup.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because you just mentioned, he's never really had consequential point per game over a full season. Well, he did. He was the RB12 in points per game on an 11-game sample size last year. So when he was on the field, he was great. And again, he's also missed at least 2 games in every year of his career. Like you said, when Charbonnet is out there, all of us feel a little bit better about this backfield because we know exactly who to start. We have also never seen Charbonnet miss time and Walker be the full-time starter. So that's maybe baked into his cost a little bit, that you might get Charbonnet missing time and he might get a bigger workload. He's just difficult to figure out, man, because he also, coming in as a prospect, didn't have a great receiving profile. And then last year he had 46 receptions in 11 games. So he's just like this weird case of like, who the heck is this guy?
Yeah, I think part of my struggles with it too. Obviously, I do think the efficiency could be a gain with obviously Kubiak coming over from the Saints this offseason to be their new OC. However, I do think the net of this offseason with Geno Smith leaving, with the offensive line, obviously, you add Gray Zabel, but realistically that went from a bottom 3 unit to potentially still a bottom 10 unit in the league. Like, I just don't really have high expectations for this Seahawks offense. Downgrading from DK Metcalf, obviously, to Cooper Kupp. You're not going to have same verticality in this offense. Geno Smith to Sam Darnold. I think Geno Smith is a superior quarterback at this point in their respective careers. Again, I'm going to give credit to what we saw from Darnold in 2024, but I think we have a bigger sample size of Geno Smith being a quarterback than we do with Sam Darnold. So I just have a lot more question marks with Seattle right now. Kenneth Walker himself is 24 years old. I believe he's turning 25 by the start of the season. And again, he was the RB12 in points per game, but that was with him being like the RB3 in points per game through the first 4 or 5 weeks of the year.
I know. He's so hard to figure out.
So
I would say, he's been RB16, RB20, and RB12 in points per game the last 3 years. I would expect more of the same in terms of like mid-range RB2 production this year, because I do think I'm not expecting Zach Charbonnet to take over this backfield with a healthy Kenneth Walker on the field. I think the coaching staff's been vocal about that. We've seen a 3-year sample size, or at least a 2-year sample size since Charbonnet's been in the NFL, that he is going to be the starting running back, Kenneth Walker. So my thought process is what I said about in our Tuesday video, kind of about Rachaad White, where it's like, okay, maybe you get a little bit of a muddy projection this year. Maybe he's a better in best ball type of pick than he would be in like a managed dynasty league or whatever. But what happens when he hits free agency next year, when he was a former 2nd-round pick, who's an exceptional athlete, who's been very productive in the past? Does he get a DeAndre Swift-like opportunity in his second stop?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to point out. Maybe in a bull case scenario, he gets a DeAndre Swift deal. It's just the issue for me between RB17, where you have him, I have him closer to RB21, is just that in that range of running backs, I either want to prioritize the high-end upside in terms of point per game production. So, for example, compared to guys like, Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Chuba Hubbard, for example, I have ranked higher than him this year. I have those guys ranked higher because they are going to give me a better point per game production this season. And then you also got the aspect of guys similar in terms of, youth, like James Cook, for example. I like the attachment to that Buffalo Bills offense. And if he does get an extension, he's going to be a bigger candidate to rise, in my opinion. And then you mix in the rookies, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey. Just for me, clicking Kenneth Walker ahead of either guys that I think are going to produce more this year or guys that I think have higher value accrual given their age is just a tough click for me.
Dude, if you look at his keep trade cut value, it is one of the craziest things that you'll ever see. This guy is all over the place every time. And it's usually, like I said, kind of September, October of every season. He just spikes. Like at this point, he was literally the RB1 in Dynasty November of his rookie season. Then he became, kind of like RB10, RB12 by the end of his rookie season. And then near the beginning of 2023, he peaked as the RB4 in Dynasty. Last year, the beginning of 2024, peaked as the RB6 in Dynasty. So this dude literally fluctuates like the weather. Like he is like an insanely volatile asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's really hard to figure out, man. I tend to buy in because I do like the opportunity of, hey, you're getting a pretty decent value in terms of what he'll give you production-wise this year. He's going about, RB19, RB20 on Underdog. I think that's his, where he's probably going to produce, if not maybe a little bit better than that. And because he's only 25 years old, was a second-round pick, good athlete, there's a good chance he could sign a nice free agent contract in 2025 post-NFL season. The one worry that we would have here is that the Seahawks re-sign him, and then we're like, oh my God, he's still tethered to this situation with Charbonnet there.
Yeah, no, it's pretty gross. Not even just with Charbonnet. It's just the fact that I just don't have high expectations for the Seahawks offense. Even with Kubiak coming over, I think Kubiak is a sharper mind, but they just don't really have a plethora of talent. Like losing DK Metcalf, losing Geno Smith, what's already still going to be a bad offensive line. Like I think the Seahawks are just going to be, credit to Kenneth Walker's purpose, but they're going to rely on their defense. They're going to slow the game down a little bit because otherwise I just don't really see big paths towards them winning a ton of football games.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on Walker, and we can move on to the next player, is he did have like a poor offensive coordinator. Like he had, what was that, Shane Waldron and like guys like that for the first 2 years of his career when he was like a 13 fantasy point per game scorer. Not a consequential asset for anyone's dynasty roster. But last year when he had a better OC in Ryan Grubb, not only did he take a huge step forward as a receiver with 46 receptions in 11 games, like, dude, 4.6 receptions per game is a lot of targets and a lot of receptions for a guy like Kenneth Walker. But he also did spike in point production overall, and he was more efficient or not more efficient on a yards per carry basis, but the big plays and the touchdowns were there, 8 touchdowns in 11 games as well. So like I said, Kubiak, maybe he upgrades the offense, maybe he makes the run game a little bit better, but like you said, it might be counterbalanced by the fact that they have a bad interior O-line and they have Sam Darnold instead of Geno Smith and no DK Metcalf to stretch the defense. So let's get into your first guy here, a guy that's a contentious topic in Dynasty, mainly because it's more like, what is your winning window? Are you competing? Are you rebuilding? Yeah. And what type of league are you in?
Yeah, exactly. Because this is a type of guy where if you're in a set Dynasty league, you're going into year 4, you're already, competing, clear top 3 team when you're in the league. It's going to have a lot more value for you than if you're brand spanking a startup and you have to make the click on this guy, maybe in the late round 2 portion, maybe in the early round 4 portion. That's usually about the range I see this guy go. And that's Saquon Barkley. If you guys actually look over on the Sleeper app, maybe you have a startup coming up, maybe you're ready to, kind of see what the ADP is looking at. They actually revamped their ADP, and Saquon Barkley is going as the 18th overall player on Sleeper. For reference, again, we both have him as our RB6 in Dynasty. He's going as the RB4 there. And I understand why Saquon Barkley, especially when more casual data is filtered in, would be a big riser in that aspect, because you're talking about a running back that is coming off a year where he was an absolute legendary running back. We're talking about a guy that had over 2,000 rushing yards, 13 rushing touchdowns, 5.81 yards per carry. The issue, though, he's 28. He has a history of injuries, and he does not have a big receiving workload. If he is not nearly as efficient, if he's not remotely as efficient as last year, let's just say it goes from 2,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, 5.8 yards per carry to 1,600 rushing yards, 5.2 yards per carry, and 11 rushing touchdowns. You're talking about the RB1 in fantasy to maybe like the RB7 or 8.
Yeah, I mean, the pro case is obviously that he's Saquon Barkley. He won Offensive Player of the Year. He's on the Madden cover. Maybe that's a curse that you guys are worried about. And the immediate short-term projection is that he is still running behind one of the best offensive lines in the league with Jalen Hurts, who draws defenders out of the box. He's exceptionally gifted. He's the best, probably the best running back in football. Right. So he's so hard to figure out from the how do you rank him in dynasty standpoint. It's so easy to rank him in redraft. Like everybody can rank him highly in redraft, but how to rank him in dynasty, like you said, truly does depend on Is this a startup? Because in a startup, it's hard to click the button on him because you're trying to be flexible for those first couple rounds. And the second you hit that button, middle of the second round where he's going, like you said, you're competing. You don't have any flexibility at that point, and you're not going to have enough information in your league by the mid-second round, late second round of, is this a league that would be beneficial to rebuild in, or is this a league to be beneficial to compete in out of the startup? So that's the tough thing with Saquon Barkley. Like you said, I would favor him as an open market dynasty value asset more in a league like our Tone Setter Truthers League that I have him in, for example, because A, I won the championship last year, and B, it's a league that's been in, it's not in infancy stages. It's been around for 4 years.
Like theoretically, I offered you like a more than fair offer for Barkley, but it goes to the aspect of once you're already in that situation, it's a year, 4 year or a league 4 years in. It's like, well, at that point, you're trying to win. You're coming off a win last year. He's going to matter more to your team versus having to actually click the button in the startup. It's basically approximating just how much point production you're buying. Because if you're getting last year's 22 points per game, it's probably going to maintain, if not slightly lose. There's really no aspect of him gaming value, of course, because he's a 28-year-old running back. But it's just the Christian McCaffrey case all over again. How much do we value a potential 20-point per game scorer? And for me now on the market, when I'm seeing the discrepancy, obviously I understand McCaffrey's coming off an injured year. Saquon Barkley had the year he did. Probably should have, got some type of accolade in terms of MVP. Like, he was the foundation of this Eagles offense. But ultimately, if I'm making the bet on one of these guys being a 20-point per game scorer, and I have to do it with McCaffrey at 49 ADP versus 18 overall ADP for Barkley, I'm taking McCaffrey every single time, even with more risk. Because ultimately, there's no such thing as less risk for a 28-year-old running back. There's a very real possibility Saquon Barkley is the RB11 in Dynasty this time next year.
Yeah, well, even Derrick Henry, too. He's the 79th overall player on Keep Trade Cut right now. And you are essentially, with Barkley, with McCaffrey, with Henry, I guess there's, a little bit of an age discrepancy between those guys. But it is a 1 to 2 year window asset that you're going after. And that's fine if that's, like you said, you're in a winning window, you're a top 3 team in your league. But like you said, it's so hard to rank him much higher than where we have him ranked in Dynasty because what Devon Achane represents, for example, who goes right around him at the running back position is, maybe you're getting a little bit more production with Saquon Barkley, but he's like 23 and a half, 24 years old.
Yeah, and in fact, when you actually take the splits with Tua, I mean, we pointed that in our redraft video. Devon Achane was just as high of a producer, if not, I believe he was actually point per game higher. So that goes to show you. Plus, you're getting the age dynamic there, and then we compare the next range. The Trevion Henderson, the Omarion Hampton. It's like, you could take Saquon, and I would understand it because of the point equity. But you have to admit to yourself that it's going to be a riskier asset to take. You're taking Saquon Barkley with the assumption he's going to be a 22, 23 point per game scorer. While there's still upside for one of those young rookies if they have an 18, 19 point per game year to be the RB4 in Dynasty this time next year. So,
yeah, I mean, do you give 18 points per game to Omarion Hampton? He might be closer to RB1 in Dynasty than RB4.
Well, I said RB4 because I'm thinking, okay, Genty, Gibbs, Bijan, but he could very well be in that tier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Barkley, I mean, I think it's obvious why he's contentious, but I think people do need to understand and recognize that the second this guy misses time with an injury, just like we saw with McCaffrey last year, his value's in the shitter, especially because he's dealt with injuries in the past.
There was a point last year on the market. Again, I'm not saying it was right. There was a point last year on the market where Jordan Mason was worth more in a trade in dynasty markets than Christian McCaffrey was.
Yeah, no, that's how volatile these assets can be. And obviously we think Barkley's going to be great this year. So we're not really worried about the immediate projection. It's just what happens if it does go wrong. So that's why we're kind of all over the place on him. It's a fun conversation because it's more philosophical. Do you want to take a running back early who's 28 years old in your startup? And we're kind of just of the opinion that we wouldn't like to do that. We would rather get our cheaper running backs later if they're older, or draft running backs who are a little bit younger, a little bit more insulated value. So Jameson Williams is one of the guys that I think is a very contentious asset in Dynasty. And part of the reason for that, for me, is because Jameson Williams before this year had 395 career receiving yards before this year. Jesus. He had 395 career receiving yards in 18 games, and he had 3 receiving touchdowns. And yes, we all knew he was a top 15 NFL draft pick, but there was a bit of that knucklehead factor where we were like, okay, this guy gets suspended for gambling, and we don't know what really to think about the guy. But now, after Jameson Williams posted a 14.2 PPR point per game season, which was a top 24 wide receiver in points per game on a 15-game season, and he had barely 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, that is an excellent season for Jameson Williams, especially when you factor in the odds stacked against a player like that through 2 NFL seasons. He was on a fast track to John Ross territory where he was at in terms of like hit rate territory at this point in time. But the concern I have for Jameson Williams is, was this everything coming together? Was this Ben Johnson in his bag, making this offense go? Jared Goff having like MVP vote caliber season? Is this all going to continue? Because I have been of the opinion that Amon-Ra is the guy in this offense who will remain the most unchanged, and Jahmyr Gibbs is probably the engine of the offense overall, and Montgomery too. So how does this affect Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta? Are you just, okay, I don't want to worry about the semantics, and I want to take the 24-year-old wide receiver who just had 1,000 yards as a third-year player? Or are you on the page of like, what is ultimately the production ceiling here? Because that's kind of the page that I'm on.
Yeah, so I was actually looking into this in terms of my notes on a recent video that we were doing. Ultimately, we didn't end up doing it, but I had my notes ready. And I think we just got to talk about the macro of the situation, because he's a guy that we were talking about potentially being a top 24 dynasty wide receiver going into this offseason. But specifically for his skill set and how he's used and how efficient he is in the context of offense, I do think he's going to be the biggest downside or the biggest loser of the Ben Johnson leaving towards Chicago situation. Ben Johnson, inarguably, created beneficial, advantageous looks in this offense. When you have a 4.2 speed wide receiver that you can create space for, guess what? The efficiency is going to look very fucking good. Jameson Williams is a 24-year-old player and a 33-point per game offense. Like, listen, hey, in that situation, he is the ultimate ceiling raiser of your offense you can possibly ask for. 58 receptions, over 1,000 receiving yards on just about 100 targets. Like, that is called getting bang for your buck on a target for target perspective. However, the thing that I'm worried about with Jameson Williams is that he actually led the NFL in terms of yards per target this past season. Actually, I have it right here. Ridiculous. 1,001 receiving yards on 91 targets this season, Corey.
Yeah, that's hard to replicate, man. And we don't like doing the whole, like, we're not big regression, nerds or whatever here, but like, aside from was a week 1 and week 2 where he got 9 and 11 targets respectively. I mean, even including those games, he only had an 18.9% target share on the year. He had, after that point, how many games here? He had 3-4 games the rest of the season with more than like 6 targets. Like he was not a heavy target commanding guy. And we all know that Sam Laporta is a good player. Jahmyr Gibbs can catch the ball out of the backfield. David Montgomery was actually very efficient as a receiver. And of course, the ultimate blanket of it all is that Amon-Ra St. Brown's an absolute hog when it comes to targets. So it's hard to imagine Jameson Williams replicating this season without somebody getting injured, realistically. Like, how do you have as efficient of a year without Ben Johnson is the question.
Yeah, and ultimately, if people are recognizing, oh, well, Jameson Williams, he's a first-round pick, like he's going to be efficient. It's like, we're not saying he's not going to be efficient. I think it's very clear he's going to be efficient this year. But is he going to be 4th highest yards per target in the NFL efficient? The only 3 guys ahead of him last season, A.J. Brown, Jaden Reed, George Kittle. Yes, George Kittle, the tight end, the most efficient per target player in the league. Absolute fucking first ballot gold jacket player. On top of that, Jameson Williams, 1.2 yards more per reception than any other player in the league with 75 plus targets.
Yeah, man. He's so hard to figure out because on the surface,
he needs a volume uptick. Straight up.
On the surface, you don't overthink it. You go 24-year-old receiver breakout season, dynasty value asset, right? That people just think that's fine. And he's going in the 4th round of underdog drafts and redraft too. So it's not like he's not, expected to be good again this year. But I haven't clicked the button on him once on underdog. And he is a better in best ball guy too. Like we know what his weekly ceiling is. He's definitely the type of guy that you want to invest in best ball. It's hard for me to click the button on a guy like Jameson Williams when you can get this. Like if Jameson Williams is worth what? Like a mid to late projected first next year? For a mid to late projected first next year, can you not get a much better production asset if you're just looking for pure production? And as a young, receiving asset, I would rather have Devontae Smith or Zay Flowers or, somebody like that who I think has a little bit more upside to be high target commanders, or at least more of a, they've done it for multiple years kind of situation as well.
Well, let me ask you this one. So we know Goff, obviously, like the reason why you like Jameson Williams, he's the ceiling raiser of this offense. Goff's got a good passing projection and he's potentially the number 2. The issue is that's potentially the number 2. That's potentially, what if it's Jahmyr Gibbs is the number 2 in targets? What if it's Sam Laporta, the number 2 in targets? Like, there's enough weapons on the Lions. Like, why wouldn't you just take George Pickens, who is going to be the number 2 in an offense that will throw the football, with a quarterback that if he stays healthy will produce as good, if not better, passing numbers than Jared Goff? Like,
Everyone
straight up.
take a shot. Danny made it about the Cowboys.
No. But just seriously, I feel like the wide sentiment is like, oh yeah, I would take Jameson Williams over George Pickens, but it's like they're the same age, and George Pickens has a better projection.
Yeah, and in all seriousness, he's also been better his whole career. Like he's the better receiver, like, as well. Like, he's been clearly a better receiver all 3 years than Jameson Williams, even if JMO had, a nice spike in production and took a step forward last year.
Yeah, for sure. The last note that I'll make is in the 2 instances that we saw with John Morton as an OC over with USC, his offenses actually were worse without him. So in 2008, USC 14th in offensive scoring, 16th in 2011. And the 2 years that Morton was the OC in USC, 65th and 37th respectively. 18.6 points per game as the Jets OC in 2017. And it jumped to 20.8 points per game the year he left. So I'm not saying he's going to be that bad as a play call with Detroit, because obviously they're incongruent situations. Detroit has a clear array of weapons, but it's just pointing out that there is a downside risk here, considering the fact that the guy he's replacing just got a 33-point per game offense led.
Yeah, exactly. The Lions will probably still be good, but are they going to be this good? That's pretty much, that's how Jameson Williams broke out, is they were this good. And Laporta also had a down season. What happens if Laporta bounces back? And St. Brown is obviously a beast, and Gibbs gets a lot of targets. Like, for the 49ers situation, this is the last thing I'll say on Jameson Williams. I've always said, just give me the pieces in the good offense. And I think that's true of Jameson Williams for the most part.
In best ball, you want to take him, go nuts.
It's just that he's really expensive. That's the part that I worry about. And he is definitely the worst target commander of the major weapons in this offense. So that's the hard part with JMO.
Like, and again, I get it. Like, in best ball and DFS, if you want him in a 1-week lineup because his ceiling is so high, tethered to a good offense, like, I'm fine with it. It's just having to make that pick in a dynasty draft when there's just cheaper alternatives that either get me more point production this year or guys in the same age bucket that I believe in more. It's tough for me to pull the trigger. Yeah,
but you'll take 4 top 10 weeks, which is what he gave you last year. And he has that spike week upside, but he's just hard to figure out from a dynasty perspective. So let's move into the young top 24 quarterbacks that you have listed here. We have really hammered the drum on these guys like many times, but just to kind of summarize it, because we could not make this video without talking about these players, because we do actually differ on them. One of them specifically, I'm more so in line with you on Drake Maye, but Drake Maye and Caleb Williams are contentious assets in Dynasty, mainly because you and I both, including me on Caleb Williams, are just a little bit higher on these guys than what the market appears to be. But I'm especially with Caleb, who is a lot worse objectively, I think, than Drake Maye, just from a real life perspective as a rookie. We're willing to forgive it more because of what the projection looks like now.
Yeah, and that's basically why I'm high on both these guys. So you made reference to it. Sleeper ADP right now, they're going off the board more so on that 2-3 turn. And I've actually seen them being, drafted all over the board. I've seen in some drafts they're going at the start of the 3rd round. In other drafts, like, for example, in the analyst league that I just joined, shout out, Dada Roma, Ron Stewart, Jacob Sanderson, a bunch of guys that you would know on Twitter are actually in that league. Caleb Williams went off the board as the 109. I took Drake Maye off the board as the 201. Like, in sharper leagues is usually when you'll see these guys go close to the top 15, but their ADP is lower because I'm assuming in some casual leagues, maybe they fall to the back end of the 3rd. Maybe they're going on that 3-4 turn, which makes them polarizing figures. I understand specifically for Caleb. We'll talk about Dre in a second, because I think we both agree that he had a very promising rookie season given the circumstances that the Patriots had in front of him. But for Caleb Williams, I'm more willing to acknowledge, like, hey, it wasn't the season I expected, but the best, hottest offensive mind on the market tethered his first head coaching gig to Caleb Williams, tethered his first offense to Caleb Williams, built him an offensive line, got him one of the best weapons group in the league. To me, if that vote of confidence is in Caleb Williams from Ben Johnson himself, who could have gotten 95% of the NFL jobs on the market.
Oh, yeah. Jacksonville apparently was just like beating the door down to try and get him.
So if that's the case and Ben Johnson thinks that of Caleb Williams, I can get that level of ceiling player because that's the prospect I believed him to be. Well, I had Caleb Williams as the number 1 quarterback last year. I had Caleb Williams with a grade comparative to the, a projection of a Kyler Murray, a projection of a Patrick Mahomes at the next level. And now he has one of the top 5 insulated situations in the league. I understand the rookie year was not of our expectations. In fact, he was going in the mid-first of startups last year. The fact that you're getting a round and a half discount is pretty remarkable in its own right, considering the situation is objectively better. It's just people are a little bit scared because of what they saw.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people because I have Drake Maye, like I have him, he's like a top.
We'll talk Maye in a second. I think
13th or 14th in my startup rankings. I'm willing to take him pretty much exactly where you did in the startup that you're talking about. But Caleb Williams, to me, the downside risk of a guy who just, I don't care however you slice it. Oh, it wasn't as bad as you think. Like he was bad.
It was down based off expectations.
He was
I'll
bad.
give you that.
Like he was bad as a rookie. He took too many sacks. He made he wasn't turning the ball over, and that kind of thing. But he just objectively did not look like he was ready for NFL stages. And like you said, you can point to Shane Waldron being a problem for that. You can point to some of the weapons not maybe giving their all for part of that, and the weapons group and the
DJ
coaching.
Moore. Hey, by the way, with DJ Moore specifically, oh my God, the amount of times I've heard quarterback school say, yeah, well, this guy's not even running. Like, what is this guy doing too? What are you doing? Do you even want to be here? Like the amount of times he was watching Caleb Williams film, and objectively, he pointed out some stuff Caleb's got to work on. But like DJ Moore's just like half-assing a route because he knows he's running a clear vert.
If Shane Waldron ever gets an OC job again, I'm literally avoiding that offense like the plague. Like literally, I'm never drafting a single player from them.
Is he just like a virus in that room? Like everybody just like gets inherently worse because of his presence? Like I'm confused.
The new Adam Gase.
Literally though.
Right now, he's literally the new Adam Gase. But anyways, my point on Caleb Williams is this. You can make you make the upside case all the time. I agree with everything you're saying as far as an upside case, but I am factoring in the downside risk a little bit more with Caleb Williams just because what if, I'm not saying he is these players, but what if he's just like Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields, where we're like, maybe this guy just isn't as good of a quarterback as we thought. And ultimately, it doesn't matter who your weapons are. It doesn't matter who your coaching is. It doesn't matter how good of an offensive line you have. If you can't play the guitar, you can't play the guitar. I'm not saying he can't because he was a great prospect and he has better situations to elevate him and all that kind of stuff. But the range of outcomes exists where he is not a good quarterback. Like Bears fans, you would think based on your, evaluation of the ceiling and whatnot, you think Bears fans are thinking they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. But just as many Bears fans as they think, they're going far in the playoffs and they think Caleb Williams is going to be a stud, there's as many that are like, I don't even know if this guy's a good quarterback.
And that's a question we'll have until the cleats hit the gridiron come September, sorry.
Yeah, November, they're not going to play.
November,
I mean, if they sleepwalk at the wheel again for the first 2 months of the season, then maybe they won't actually hit the gridiron until November. But I mean, Drake Maye, frankly,
this is easy.
Frankly, I don't actually think he's contentious, frankly. I think that
I've seen him fall in some drafts.
Yes, but Keep Trade Cut has him as like a mid-second round pick. I have him kind of early to mid-second round. You have him more at the late first round. Like, I actually don't think he's very contentious.
See, counterpoint, his ADP on Sleeper's 24 overall. So I do think he's contentious because there's drafts that I've seen him go on that 1-2 turn. So if his ADP is at 24, that means that in some casual drafts, he's falling to the mid-third, late third. And let's just address it. The reason why people are maybe scared of Drake Maye is because they'll think, oh, I'm projecting all 32 offenses in the league, and the Patriots just don't really feel like an offense I can project well because the offensive line, despite adding Will Campbell, is still a little bit of a work in progress. I like McDaniels, but it's not like he's a Ben Johnson, Kyle Shanahan type of advantage. The run game, is his best pass catcher on the team right now a running back? Like, there's question marks there, but ultimately we both agree he's a stud talent. He was a top 12 quarterback in points per game last year, despite the situation, and his situation only got better.
That's why I don't think he's contentious. But you're right. There's casual fantasy players out there that don't know that Stephon Diggs. Well, I mean, maybe they know that Stephon Diggs was at it, but they didn't, scout Kyle Williams in depth, and they don't know how much the offensive line was a liability for him last year and what Josh McDaniels can do as a play caller versus when he's actually a head coach and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think generally the market is pretty in unison that they're optimistic on Drake Maye, I guess would be my only pushback of why I don't think he's that contentious. But like you said, the ADP is a little bit of a wider range of outcomes to the point that there are some people just letting him fall because Patriots quarterback, Patriots were bad, offensive line's bad. There's people with lazy takes, I would say, about the Patriots.
Ultimately, turn on the tape, you'll see Drake Maye. I mean, we're 400 rushing yards on 54 carries for a 6'5", 230-pound gunslinger. Pretty simple there. But we can move on to, we mentioned two young second-year quarterbacks. We may as well group the young second-year receivers together because they are very contentious right now. Yes, everybody knows Malik Neighbors, stud. Brian Thomas Jr., stud. Lab McConkey, stud. The next two guys that we talk about had, let's just say, not the rookie seasons that we expected. Marvin Harrison Jr. was going on the 1-2 turn, about 850 receiving yards. Odunze, we both had higher hopes for, only 750 receiving yards. I just talked about his quarterback. I'll let you talk about Marvin Harrison first, because I think we both agree out of these two options, he is the better bet. And ultimately, what maybe the data pointed from his rookie season that people are overlooking.
I don't think there's a player I've moved around my dynasty rankings more this offseason than Marvin Harrison. Like, seriously, because this is why a player is contentious. A player is not contentious if you only see one range of outcomes for them. A player is contentious when it is truly a coin flip what ends up happening in their career. And to me, there's going to be half the crowd in fantasy going, exactly. That's why he was Marvin Harrison Jr. That's why we shouldn't have been worried about.
We said that after week 2 because he caught a long touchdown. I think it was against the Bills.
Rams. He had a big game against the Rams in the first half, and everybody was like, "That there's Marvin. There's the Marvin we all know and love." So there's going to be that crowd. Let's say Marvin hits, has 1,400 yards, 9 touchdowns this year, is a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy. Everyone's going to go, why were we worried? Come on, guys. That was the dumbest thing. He was like the best
prospect. Lamb 2.0. Come on.
Yeah. We all thought he was this good. Why didn't you guys trust the process? But then there's going to be the other side of the coin where we're like, okay, the guy was wide receiver 39 as a rookie, despite being drafted, at the 1-2 turn in redraft leagues and being drafted at the 1-2 turn in dynasty startups as well. And objectively, like, I could list some horrific names that outscored Marvin Harrison last year in fantasy football. And it's not like we can just play the card. Oh, he wasn't supposed to be good. He was a rookie and rookie wide receivers and all this kind of stuff. Like, he was objectively very pro ready. He should have came in and dominated.
Yeah, and obviously there is context that he had a 2-target, 14% snap share game against Green Bay. So if you actually equated this season to a 16-game sample and say he had 114 targets instead of 116, which do you think is a better rookie season? Now, obviously, it's incongruent in terms of the situations each year we're in. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. had an immediate claim to be a top 2 target. This guy may be battling more target competition early on. But let's play the game. 114 targets, 62 receptions, 885 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns in 16 games. Yeah, you heard that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. 111 targets, 74 receptions, 935 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. Which is the better rookie year?
I'm trying to figure out who the guy is that you're referring to. I'm not even trying to think of who's the better rookie season. I'm just trying to guess who it is. You're gonna have to.
But who is the better rookie season? Like answer it. Who do you think?
Probably not the one that's Marvin's.
Okay. So the second guy I mentioned, again, different circumstances. There was more target competition, but rookie year CeeDee Lamb. And if you guys read over on receptionperception.com, one Matt Harmon actually made the potential case that Marvin Harrison Jr., yeah, he's not a finished product, but if he does end up materializing, it's going to look somewhat like 88 over in Dallas.
Yeah, and I think I've said Devontae Adams is what he would turn into if he turns into a great receiver. And both of those guys, Lamb and Adams, were not exceptional as rookies. They took until their second, third, fourth, even fourth season, I believe, is when Devontae Adams actually ended up breaking out. So you gotta either buy into Harrison, the prospect, and buy into what Harrison's good flashes looked like, or there's going to be, a crowd that's like, dude, he was like worse than freaking Keenan Allen in fantasy last year.
Yeah. And both sides would be right.
Yeah. Like, he's so hard to figure out, man, because again, in a dynasty startup, if you're going kind of flexibility, rebuild potentially out of the startup, is there a more generational wealth opportunity than Marvin Harrison Jr. if you're a pro Marvin Harrison Jr. person?
Well, the upside is he's literally where he was drafted to be. For example, Brian Thomas Jr., we both have as wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 7 respectively in Dynasty.
Yeah.
If you had told me after their rookie seasons that Brian Thomas Jr. was the 12 and Marvin Harrison Jr. was the 6, I think that would have been more likely than the outcome that we saw. Now, obviously, Brian Thomas Jr. had an amazing rookie season, but the fact that Marv had an up and down rookie year and he's still a top 12 Dynasty wide receiver, people understand if he does go out there and has 1,100 yards, 1,200 yards like CeeDee Lamb did in year 2, we're talking not only a top 8 overall receiver, we're talking of being back in that discussion. Maybe not exactly with the BTJ neighbors because I think they're more proven as talents. But if by that point, Marvin Harrison Jr. has an 1,100, 1,200 yard year under his belt, well, he was the better prospect profile coming in, people will point to.
Yeah. Yeah. And people might even point to too, depending on what the tape looks like or depending on what the advanced metrics look like, if he's like a 3+ yard per route run guy, it's not outside the range of outcomes that he's the dynasty wide receiver 1 after his second year. It's not outside the range of outcomes because
he would need a lot to break right because like if Neighbors had like 1,200 yards, like automatically because it's 2 years versus one, like he would get the nod. Like he would need some stuff to break right, but there is a path we can see him being a 1-2 turn, maybe even straight up first round startup pick this time next year.
Yeah, but he could be a first team All Pro next year. Like he has that type of ability. It's just, did you see first team All Pro when you watched him as a rookie? And you did not. And you might even say like, no, not even close. Like he'd be like a Pro Bowler would be a good career for him after what I saw as a rookie.
So he goes off the board 29th overall by Sleeper ADP. Over on the site, if you look at our Superflex rankings, we have him about, that around that range, like early third round. And I've seen already in a couple startups this year, the 301 to 305 range is usually the sweet spot we see Marvin Harrison go. So would you be willing to pull the trigger at that spot? Obviously, by where you have him ranked, I'm assuming the answer is yes.
Yeah, I'm willing. I think anytime you're in the third round of a dynasty startup and you can start it with Josh Allen, Ladd McConkey, Marvin Harrison or something in a non-third round reversal situation, like, yeah, you're probably feeling good about that.
In the startup right now, somebody started Neighbors, McConkey, and Marv.
Because it was third round reversal, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so they actually had a late first round pick. They took Neighbors ahead of Lamb, which again, you actually have ranked that way.
I have Matt Jefferson now too, for what it's worth.
Fair enough. So he took him regardless. So like one of the top 4 receivers, I think is fine for a first round pick. Ladd at 203. That was like a little bit spicy. And then we got Marvin Harrison, I believe, at the 302 is because I traded down one spot with him.
Yeah, I mean, I have McConkey at 24, so it's not outrageous to take him that high.
And I don't think so either. But what I'm pointing out is like that, like the upside of that wide receiver core. Like, what if those are 3 of like the 6 best dynasty wide receivers this time next year, along with the top 3 guys?
Yeah, no, it would not shock me. And like the thing with Harrison too is like you do have to make the decision to take him over guys that we objectively feel better about how tight their range of outcomes are. You have to take Harrison. Potentially over McConkey, probably not in some leagues. But
I can't do that. But
you have to take him over probably both rookie receivers, Travis Hunter and Tedero McMillan, where he goes. Like you probably, that's where his ADP is. You probably have to take him there. So you probably have to take him even. There's many people out there that would argue JSN and AJ Brown and stuff over Marvin Harrison as well, given what we've seen from him.
So I actually have Harrison at 12, right behind McConkey 11, London 10, and I have my beloved Travis Hunter at 9.
Yeah, the only difference that I have is I made the change. I have Hunter ahead of Harrison too. I didn't for a while, but I made the change. This is why I'm saying he changes so much in my rankings. I've had him as high, I believe, as wide receiver 9 or 8 in Dynasty at some point this offseason. And then now I have him, I believe, like 11 or 12.
I think that's fair. Again, Marvin Harrison Jr. very polarizing because we've seen how the market likes him when he's at a high. So if he can get back to that high, obviously we're talking about a big-time value accrual potential player. Speaking of another player in that class, we mentioned the 2 rookie receivers. Odunze is an interesting profile right now because when you look at this offseason, obviously Ben Johnson comes over, going into year 2 with Caleb Williams. Like he was a guy that we were very excited about. Oh my God, year 2 breakout. It's just him and DJ Moore out there. What if he takes another step, has the ability to play inside out, potentially even work as the primary X on that team? Then in the draft, in Ben Johnson's first draft as an offensive play caller, as a head coach of the Chicago Bears, let me give that man his goddamn respect. He goes and takes 10th overall, Colson Loveland, 39th overall, Luther Burden. So it went from him competing with targets to with DJ Moore to now it's 4 guys that, although there's no alpha, they're all good enough to potentially be the one. So it's so confusing for me because it's like, on one hand, I see the upside where if he does become the one in an offense I believe in, the upside is massive. But on the other hand, I think any of these 4 could end up being the one.
Yeah, I go back and forth on Odunze.
It's so weird.
Before the draft, like the territory of Hunter, Marvin, Tet, AJ Brown, JSN, Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, Rashee Rice types. That's where Odunze would be right now. If they don't draft Burden, they don't draft Loveland. That's where Odunze would be, guaranteed. That's where he was ranked for everybody before the draft. So my question is like, should he be ranked still that high, even despite the additions? Because he has the most team investment of any of, I guess Loveland was the same pick that he was, but he's also a tight end and he's a developmental guy. So I look at Odunze, and if you look at his reception perception from his rookie season, he's 71st percentile against man, 87th against press, 52nd against zone. And Harmon details like, dog, nobody looked good in this offense. Like we can't blame Odunze for this. And that's fair. But also like, maybe sometimes great players will overcome stuff like that. So it's so hard to really determine what's real and what's not.
Yeah, so I have Odunze. I had him initially like very, very high. Like he was like, I think going into the offseason, once they hired Ben Johnson, I'm like, yeah, dude, like why isn't he like the wide receiver 16, wide receiver 17 in Dynasty? I do believe a lot in the talent of Loveland and Burden enough to drop him to now. I believe he's my 23 or 24 is where I have him. Let me actually take a look exactly, but it doesn't really matter. The point being, like, that's about the range he went from where he started versus where you have him now. I have him at 22. The issue that I have is that I think these guys are all talented enough, but you can't congruently analyze like, oh, he either gets the targets or he doesn't, sorry, because if he does become the one, like the value upside is just so high to the point where I'm willing to take stabs on all of them. Maybe if they're like 10 to 15% more expensive than their median projection, I'm willing to take that on each of these guys in this offense because the upside for any one of them being the one is higher than that. It's an exponential type of value accrual.
I know, and that's what keeps him at 22 for me.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question, because these would all be the same type of asset. You on a rebuilding team, would you rather have Xavier Worthy, Rome Odunze, or Emeka Egbuka? Keep trade cut those guys.
So I currently have it again. Worthy and Odunze I have back-to-back 22 and 23. I technically have Odunze one spot higher, but I keep wrestling with that. The more we hear more information about Rashee Rice,
I have Worthy higher, and I think it's just objectively that I think he looked better as a rookie.
Yeah. And I think that's fair too. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I have Worthy higher in my redraft ranking, so I will make that change. I'll move Worthy one spot higher.
Also younger him,
but I do have Egbuka a couple spots ahead of them, regardless.
So you take the reroll on Egbuka over these two guys.
I would, simply because I love the situation, and I thought Egbuka was a good enough talent to be able to have an Amon or St. Brown like upside.
How the hell are you higher on a Tampa Bay Buccaneer receiver
Dude,
who I absolutely loved before the draft?
You guys are going to throw the ball 600 times, and the two vets ahead of him either have massive injury concerns or potential retirement concerns.
I guess, but Worthy and Odunze represent to me like the exact definition of towing the line between a good and a bad rookie season. Because Odunze objectively, I think, had a bad rookie season, but when you factor in the Waldron
based off expectations
of it all, I would say based on what he could have done, it was about at expectations. And I would say the same for Worthy as well.
It's just, it's such a weird polarizing situation for this range of wide receiver. And that's kind of why, I've pointed out multiple times, once wide receiver 18 is off the board in your startup. So like wide receiver 18 for me right now is Rashee Rice in my startup rankings. Once he is off the board, there's about 13 guys that blend in, like 19 to 32. I have Egbuka at 19, and I have at 32 right now DJ Moore, funny enough, because we just talked about his teammate. Or 31, I have Jameson Williams. Or 30, I have Jerry Jeudy. It's like, do you really want to take the first name of a receiver off the board in that list? Or would you rather just wait?
I think the right answer for me is mix up a couple of these profiles in the mid rounds of your startup, because you and I play in leagues where there's a lot of, it's PPR and there's scoring bonuses and there's a lot of wide receiver spots. So if you walk out of your mid rounds, you already have, let's say, 2 receivers on your roster from the first 3 rounds of the startup or whatever, and you walk out of the mid rounds with Odunze, Devontae Smith, Olave, and Emeka Egbuka or something. It's like, wow, great. You have a couple different types of profiles that you can work around.
Yeah. No, I think that's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, for sure. So Odunze is I think he's the most contentious of anybody here, because I really do think there's a possibility that he alphas the rest of the receivers in this core, given the type of prospect he was. And how Harmon talks about him in his reception. He's like, dude, nobody's realizing that this guy had Terry McLaurin, T. Higgins rookie season without the production.
Yeah, like those numbers that he put up against Man Impress specifically, which makes sense if you watch the stylistic type of player he was at Washington. He was this ultimate, man-beating wide receiver. You don't want to leave him on an island. If you gave him an ISO, he was coming down with the football. It makes sense why he would have graded that well. His ultimate ceiling is that as an X-wide receiver. He's 6'3". He's 210 pounds. Like, if he is able to work out in a Caleb Williams offense, if Caleb Williams does become the quarterback that I mentioned earlier, when we talked about him in May, like, the upside for Odunze, given his skill set, is massive.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So let's talk about another massive receiver here, because he's a contentious guy for the two of us.
Literally massive.
Yeah, literally massive. I have DK Metcalf at wide receiver 26 in Dynasty. And part of it, like, not that I'm a follow the money bro, But like part of it is the sheer asset volume that they gave up for Metcalf in terms of what they traded for him, and then also the contract that they give him. The pros to me are very clearly that like we know this guy's a top tier receiver in the NFL. At times, maybe he's been a little bit overrated, but generally speaking, I think most people in the NFL, if you polled every GM in the league, would probably rank DK Metcalf as a top 15 NFL receiver, top 20 NFL receiver. And he's on an offense now where he is the only show in town. Like Roman Wilson is their number 2 receiver. Like he is going to get fed. And we have not seen DK Metcalf really get used outside of like red zone and deep targets and whatnot. He's not been a big time alpha in terms of target share. But I don't think he's one of these few receivers to me that I don't think it was because he can't do it. I think it was more that was Lockett's role. And last year it was JSN's role. So it's weird, man. It's really hard to figure out DK Metcalf. But part of me thinks that he's probably just going to be one of these spike week upside guys. And where you're getting him in startups, he's like your 4th or 5th receiver. And I think that's worth it. I get he's 27 years old, hasn't really had like a top 15 level production ceiling since his 2nd season. But the fact that he's been good this whole time shows me that I'm not going to use this comparison because it's not really correct. But we've seen really good receivers who were maybe better in real life, like Stephon Diggs in Minnesota, go to new teams and get more involvement. And what if Metcalf has more involvement? I'm not saying he's going to have as good of a production.
We don't have to play the what if game when he's going to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Arthur Smith.
I get that. All I'm saying is Metcalf has not been a 30% target share guy at any point in his career, but I don't think it was necessarily because he can't command a 30% target share.
The issues here is that you're getting a severe quarterback downgrade inherently, no matter who's the Steelers starter at this point. Like I would, they could sign Aaron Rodgers going into the season. I think Geno Smith last year is better than what current Aaron Rodgers is.
Yeah, I don't think that's an outrageous take at all.
And adding to that, so when we look at the history of Arthur Smith as an offensive play caller, 2019, 2020, 2021 with the Tennessee Titans, 2022, 2023 with the Atlanta Falcons. Care to guess with A.J. Brown and Drake London? Keep in mind, A.J. Brown peaks as a 158 target and 17 game player. Drake London peaks as a 158 target and 17 game player in the years that they are not with Arthur Smith. You want to know what the peak targets per game of both those guys were with Arthur Smith as their offensive play caller?
Probably like 6 or 7.
Okay. You underguessed 8.1 targets per game. For reference, the other top alphas in the league, you're looking 9.5. Malik Neighbors, when he was healthy, averaged like 11.8 targets per game. There's just not enough volume given the context of this offense. On top of that, I don't think DK Metcalf is a true number 1 wide receiver like an A.J. Brown, like a Drake London is. So if the offensive insulation, because the quarterback play, because the overall passing prowess isn't there, you're not going to get a ton of volume because Arthur Smith historically has not been a high volume play caller on the passing perspective. And I have question marks in terms of the talent level of DK Metcalf being a number 1 wide receiver. And he's 27. Like, I have him at wide receiver 29 out of respect because when you're filling a lineup, he's like an appealing option. But realistically, that's the reason why he's at the back end of that 13 player area I mentioned, wide receiver 19 to 32 kind of blending in, why he's on the back end of that instead of being more so in the mid to high end of that.
Yeah. The only 2 things I can say to push back is you're making very valid points. Like obviously Arthur Smith is not going to be a pro for the passing game. The only 2 things I would argue is that he's only commanded a 25+% target share twice. And that's because he's competing with Tyler Lockett and the last 2 years, JSN and Tyler Lockett for targets. So his last 2 years not being that great shouldn't really shock any of us because his role was stretch the field, be a 21 to 22% target share guy, and do.
I think he's way better in real life than fantasy.
Right, but my only counterpoint to that is that when he's been a 25+% target share guy, he's been a difference making 15, 16, 17, 18 point per game wide receiver, maybe not 18 points per game, but he's been a difference making guy when he's been getting the target share. 17.0 in his 2nd season, he was a 27% target share guy. In 2021, I believe he was just over a 25% target share as well. So, and the other thing about the Arthur Smith and not using George Pickens too. George Pickens, Drake London, and A.J. Brown, maybe to the fullest extent of what they did as soon as they left Arthur Smith. It also kind of coincided with those guys being young players at the time too. And DK Metcalf is an established veteran wide receiver who can win at the NFL level. Drake London was 21 and 22 years old when Arthur Smith was his OC.
And he was 23 the season after where he had 48 more targets.
Right, but naturally a 3rd-year receiver is going to produce better than a year 1 and year 2 receiver.
Fair, but then you can even point to year 3 AJ Brown. At that point, you're talking about a prime AJ Brown getting 8.1 targets per game. He leaves for Philly the next season. He has 145 targets.
But again, I can still point to AJ Brown that year having more target competition than DK Metcalf has currently.
Who?
Didn't he have that 1 year where Corey Davis was like really solid?
Was that 2021 or 2020?
I think that was the year that you're referring to.
Let me see here. I know what you're talking about. I know Corey Davis had a big year, but was it 20? It was 2020. The 2021 year, he had 492 yards on 59 targets.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but I don't know. My thought process is this. You got a super highly paid wide receiver who hasn't really commanded the target share that he has the first couple of years of his career that he has the last couple of years, but I think all of us can kind of agree that he had the biggest target competition of his entire career the last 2 seasons.
Players command targets.
They do. You're right. They do. And Metcalf's a great player. I don't think he's an elite player, but I think he's a great player. And I do think that
he's a good player.
I think you're underrating how good he is.
He's a good wide receiver too.
I think he's better than you think. He went from overrated to underrated really quickly to me.
I don't know, man. Like you're gonna hate me for this. I think the guy that they're replacing him with is better than him today.
I disagree. I think that DK Metcalf runs circles around George Pickens, and I don't think he'd be saying that if he wasn't a Dallas Cowboy now.
Hey, dude, if a 27-year-old Metcalf wants to go for his second best season in his career, be my guess.
If DK Metcalf had gone to the Cowboys, you'd be hyping up way more than you are George Pickens, in my opinion.
I was going to say something out of pocket. If we had signed him to a $32 million per year deal, I would have cried my eyes out. Like you're telling me he's making just as much as CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown?
This is why he's contentious, man, because he is generally, I would consider him by the holistic view of the NFL kind of overrated as a real life talent. But I think given the projection in fantasy, he's gotten a little bit underrated. So he's hard to figure out for that reason. This is a contentious player for a reason. There is pros on my side. There is cons on your side that are both equally valid. Yeah. That's the hard part about Metcalf.
Yeah, no, he's polarizing for sure. But I would just rather in that range, if you're getting a 27-year-old player, like pay up or get a Devontae Adams for cheaper.
I see you and I both differ on the strategy in terms of I like 3 to 4 year production window players like DK Metcalf. You're more like, I'll just take the best production window.
Give me consequential production. Like straight up, I would rather the guy that's going to finish as the wide receiver 7 in points per game this year that maybe is 32 years old versus the guy that's 27-year-old that probably has a wide receiver 23 point per game projection.
I get that, but I also, for what it's worth, like Metcalf in redraft too, and think he's going to be.
What do you have him ranked in redraft?
He's going to be.
We did our top 24. He didn't make it.
I am at 25, and he was in my top 20. We did our top 25 wide receiver rankings, and he was the guy that was at 25 for me who just missed out. And Adams, who you just mentioned, is at 17. That's not a major difference, 25 to 17 for me.
That's 25 versus 14 for me. So that's
so it's a bit. I mean, to me, when you're getting 2 to 3 more productive years out of a guy because he's much younger, I think that's a worthy trade-off to me.
Yeah, I don't know. And not to mention he's 25 right now because I don't know what's the status of like Chris Godwin. I don't know. He's just kind of sexless.
I get it. Anyways, we could close this video out. We were kind of rambling at this point. Contentious players. We went through some debates back and forth. Let us know what you guys think of these players down below. Like the video, subscribe, check out the site for all of our dynasty rankings. We made a lot of reference to them in this video. But with that being said, peace out. And we'll talk to you soon.